People who saw me that morning will tell you I did not move. They are right and they are wrong. They saw a man in a red coat and a tall black cap stand at the king's arch with his eyes fixed on nothing, his white gloves still on the stock of his rifle, his boots planted as if the cobblestones had grown up around them. They saw a statue. What I am going to tell you is what the statue was doing on the inside, because there is a great deal a man can do while standing perfectly still. And the most important thing I did that day, I did without lifting a finger or saying a single word, until I was lawfully told that I might. I have stood the King's Arch at Marlhaven for 19 years. I came to it the way most of us came, out of the line regiments, with a back that had carried a pack across the marches of the North, and a memory that had carried worse. The ceremonial guard is not what people think it is. They think it is a costume. They think we are chosen for our height and our jaw, and the way we look in the photographs the visitors take, and that the rifle is a prop and the stillness is a trick, like a man pretending to be a clockwork soldier in a fair. They are welcome to think it. The stillness is the work. It is the hardest soldiering I have ever done, harder than the marches, because on the march your body moves and your mind can wander, and on the arch your body is forbidden to move, and so your mind has nowhere to go but in. You learn yourself standing there. You meet every old debt you owe. You stand your post, and your post stands inside you, and after enough years a man cannot always tell which one is holding the other up. So I will not pretend the stillness was nothing, but I will also not let anyone tell you it was empty. The discipline of the arch is not the discipline of a dead thing. It is the discipline of a loaded thing that has chosen, this hour and the next, not to go off. There is a great difference between a man who cannot move and a man who will not, and on that morning a powerful lord made the mistake of his life because he could not tell the two apart. It was the second week of summer, and the forecourt was bright the way it only is a few weeks a year in Aldwych, when the haze burns off the river before noon, and the gilded iron of the railings throws the light back hard enough to make the tourists shade their eyes. They came in their hundreds that season, up the long approach from the city, filing along the rope line to watch the change of the guard, their telephones raised, their children on their shoulders. I had stood through 10,000 mornings like it. The smell of the place does not change. Hot stone, the river when the wind turns, the particular dry wool smell of my own coat warming in the sun, the bearskin pressing its weight down through the chinstrap into the back of my neck. By the third hour of a watch the cap is a hand laid steady on the top of your skull. You make peace with it, or you do not last. The old man was called Tobias Reed, though the whole palace called him Old Reed, and he kept the gardens of the inner court. He had kept them longer than I had stood the arch. He was past 70 and bent like a man who had spent his life looking down at growing things, and he had a way of touching a hedge as he passed it, just a brush of 2 fingers, the way you might touch the shoulder of a friend. He had given 2 sons to the king's wars in the East and buried both, and he never spoke of it. And the king, the old king, the father of the one I will come to, had granted him a cottage on the grounds for life as a thing of honor. Reed was not a clever man, and he was not a strong one anymore, and he was the gentlest soul inside those walls. And on the morning I am telling you about, 4 men of the household watch dragged him across my forecourt by the arms while he tried to keep his feet, and a powerful man walked behind him calling him a thief. The powerful man was the Lord Treasurer of the household, and his name was Crispin Vance. I will give you his name because his name is the only thing he had left when the day was done, and because I want you to understand that I am not describing a monster. He was not a monster. He was something more ordinary and more dangerous than a monster. He was a man who had been obeyed his whole life and had come to believe that obedience was the same as truth, that a thing was so because he had said it, and that anyone who failed to confirm it was being merely difficult or stupid or insolent, and could be made to come round with enough pressure correctly applied. He was perhaps 50, well-fed and well-made, with a tailor's coat and rings on 3 fingers and a voice pitched to fill a room and accustomed to filling it. He held the purse of the whole household. The privy coin, the plate, the king's own jewels of state, all of it passed under his ledger and his seal. A man with the keys to that much wealth either becomes very careful or becomes very confident, and the Lord Treasurer had long ago stopped being careful. What had happened, though I did not yet know all of it as I stood there, was this. A great medal of state, the coronation star, gold and old and worth a small estate, had gone missing from the strong room 2 nights before. It was a famous piece. The king wore it twice a year. Its loss was the kind of thing that ends a treasurer, because the treasurer holds the only other key and signs for every entry into the room, and there is no honest way for it to walk out under his seal without his knowing. The Lord Treasurer had known this the moment the loss was found, and he had done what such men do. He had found someone smaller to carry it. Old Reed had been in the lower passage that night because the cistern by the strong room wall had cracked and was weeping water into the masonry, and Reed, who tended the grounds and everything that touched them, had gone down with a lantern and a bucket to keep it from rotting the old timbers. He had been seen. That was all the Lord Treasurer needed. A poor old man, with no friend powerful enough to matter, seen near the room on the night the star went missing. By the time the sun came up on that bright morning, the story had already been built and dressed and sent out into the palace. The gardener, trusted too long, had crept into the strong room and taken the coronation star, and the Lord Treasurer, vigilant as ever, had run the thief to ground. There was only one flaw in it, and the flaw was me. Because I had been on the night watch as well. We rotate the arch and the inner postings, and that night I had stood the lower gallery posting that looks down the service stair toward the strong room passage, a quiet posting, a dark one, where nothing ever happens and a man's only enemy is sleep. And I do not sleep on a post. I have never once slept on a post in 19 years, and the reason I have never slept is the reason I am telling you any of this, and I will come to it. I stood that gallery from midnight, and I watched the passage below the way I watch everything, which is to say completely, because the watching is the whole of the work, and a man who half watches might as well be a coat on a peg. I saw old Reed go down with his lantern and his bucket, and I saw him come back up an hour later, wet to the elbows, muttering at the cistern, carrying nothing but his bucket and his light. I marked the hour. I mark every hour. It is a habit older than my service. And later, in the smallest part of the night, when the passage had been dark and empty for a long time, I saw a second man come down. He came without a lantern, which an honest man does not do, and he moved along the wall, which an honest man does not do, and he went into the strong room passage, and he came out of it with a flat shape under his coat held tight against his ribs, and he went away up the far stair toward the treasury wing. I could not see his face. The gallery is high, and the passage is deep, and the only light was the one lamp that burns all night at the turn of the stair. But I saw his coat, and I saw his boots, and I saw the way he favored his right leg coming up the steps, a small hitch in the stride, and I saw that he wore a ring on his hand that caught the one lamp once as he passed beneath it, a hard white flash, and was gone. I marked the hour of that too, 3:30. I am telling you these things plainly, the way I laid them up in my memory that night, because the whole of what came after turns on them, and because I want you to understand what kind of witness the Lord Treasurer had chosen to lean on when he turned to the silent man at the arch and ordered him to swear to a lie. He thought he was choosing the easiest witness in the palace. A guard cannot speak on his post. A guard is trained from his first day to be a thing that does not answer, does not argue, does not so much as turn his eyes. And a man who has watched us for years, as the Lord Treasurer had, comes to believe that the silence goes all the way down, that there is nothing behind it but training, and that training can be commanded. He thought I was a tool that had simply not yet been picked up. He thought all he had to do was reach out and take hold of me and point me where he wished, and I would say the words, because saying words to powerful men is what tools are for. He had it exactly backward. The silence was not the absence of a man. The silence was the man, standing on top of everything he knew, holding still. They brought Reed across the forecourt at the worst hour, when the rope line was 3 deep with visitors and every telephone in Aldwych was raised. I think the Lord Treasurer chose the hour. A confession wrung out in a quiet room is a private thing and can be doubted later. A thief dragged before the world weeping, while the great man stands over him grave and merciful. That is a thing the world watches happen and remembers, and it is very hard to unwatch. The Lord Treasurer understood crowds. He understood that a story seen by enough eyes becomes true in a way that no ledger can match. Reed was not weeping. That is the first thing I will say for him. He was frightened. His old face had gone the gray of wet ash and his hands were shaking. But he was not weeping and he was not pleading. And when they stopped him in the center of my forecourt, 10 paces from where I stood, he found his feet and he stood on them. He looked for a moment like a man trying to remember the shape of his own dignity and finding it still there under everything that was being done to him. He looked across at me. I do not know why. Perhaps because I was the one still thing in all that noise and motion, and a frightened man looks for something that is not moving. Our eyes did not meet because my eyes were forward and would stay forward, but I knew he had looked, the way you know a hand has come near a flame. "You will tell them," the Lord Treasurer said. He was not speaking to Reed. He had turned and he was speaking to me. He came up close, the way they do, the ones who have decided you are furniture, close enough that I could smell the oil in his hair, and the wine that was already on his breath before noon, close enough that the brim of his hat nearly touched the fur of my cap when he tilted his head to look up into my face. The crowd loved it. I heard the murmur run down the rope line and rise, the particular sound a crowd makes when it senses that something is going to happen to the man who is not allowed to react. He stood in my space, and he smiled the smile of a man performing patience. "You stood the lower gallery on the night of the theft," he said. "Do not trouble to pretend otherwise, I have the watch roll. You stood the gallery and you saw this man," he flung an arm back at Reed without looking at him, "go down into the passage. You saw him carry up the star. You saw it, Corporal, and you will say so, plainly now before these good people so that there is no doubt and no scandal and no slow business of inquiries. One word. You saw the gardener take the star. Say it." I said nothing. I did not move. My eyes stayed forward on the far railing and the river beyond it, the way they are trained to stay, and behind that stillness I was as busy as a man can be. Because here is what I knew, standing there, that the Lord Treasurer did not know I knew. I knew that I had not seen old Reed carry up the star. I had seen him carry up an empty bucket, wet to the elbows, at the hour I had marked. I knew that the man who had carried the flat shape out of the passage had come down 2 hours after Reed had gone back to his bed, had come down without a light, had favored his right leg on the stairs, had worn a ring that flashed white under the lamp. And I knew I had not let myself fully know it until that moment, standing in the bright forecourt with the wine breath in my face, because it is a hard thing to know about a man who can break you, that the Lord Treasurer of the household favored his right leg. He was favoring it now. He had taken a fall hunting in the spring, and the whole palace had heard him complain of it for a month. He was favoring it as he leaned into my face and smiled, and told me what I had seen. He had robbed the strong room himself. He had carried the star out under his own coat at 3:30. And now he was standing in front of the one man who had watched him do it, ordering that man to swear it had been someone else. I have thought about that morning a great many times in the years since, and I have come to believe that the Lord Treasurer never once, in all his calculation, considered that I might know. It was not that he had thought about it and dismissed it. It was that I was not, to his mind, the kind of thing that knows. A guard sees, in the way a window sees light passes through and nothing is kept. He had spent his life around us, and he had never once wondered what we did with the long hours of watching, never imagined that a man standing motionless for 3 hours in the dark might be doing the most disciplined thinking of his life, laying up the hours and the faces and the small flashing details against a day he hoped would never come and prepared for anyway. He saw a window. He did not know he was leaning on the one wall in the palace that had eyes. "Say it," he said again, lower now, the smile thinning. You think your silence is loyalty to something. It is not. It is insolence, and I will not be made a fool of in front of a rabble by a man in a fur hat. Open your mouth and tell these people what you saw, corporal, or I promise you that by tonight you will not have a post to stand. I will tell you now what I was holding on to while he said it, because it is the heart of the whole matter, and I have never told it whole to anyone. 23 years before that morning, when I was a young soldier in the line and not yet a guardsman, I served under a sergeant named Aldous Hartley. He was the best of us. He was the kind of soldier the young ones follow without being ordered to, because he was hard on himself before he was ever hard on you, and he never asked a man to stand anywhere he would not stand first. There was a winter on the northern marches when stores went missing from the company, coin and rations and a quantity of powder, and an officer above us, a vain and frightened captain who had let the books fall into ruin and feared the reckoning, found it convenient to lay the blame on Hartley. It was a lie. Anyone who knew Hartley knew it was a lie. And the men who could have spoken, the men who had seen the captain's own hands in the stores, the men who had carried the missing rations for him on a dark night thinking they were following orders, those men stayed silent. They stayed silent because the captain had power and Hartley had only the truth, and the truth, when it has no one willing to carry it, weighs nothing at all. I was young. I had seen a piece of it. I told myself it was not my place, that no one would believe a private over a captain, that to speak would only ruin me alongside him and help no one. I found, in other words, all the reasons a frightened young man finds, and I held my tongue, and Sergeant Hartley was broken at a drumhead court and stripped of his rank and sent home in disgrace, and he did not live 2 years after it. The disgrace killed him as surely as a ball would have, and the captain who lied was promoted that spring. I have carried Aldous Hartley up every set of palace stairs I have ever climbed. He is the reason I do not sleep on a post. He is the reason I mark every hour. He is the reason that, somewhere in the long dark watches, I made myself into the kind of witness I had failed to be when it mattered, not out of any cleverness, but out of a debt that could never be paid to the man I owed it to, and so had to be paid forward to whatever frightened innocent should one day stand in a bright forecourt with no friend powerful enough to matter and look across at the one still thing in all the noise. So when the Lord Treasurer leaned into my face and told me to swear a poor old man into ruin, he was not asking me for a small thing. He was asking me to be the silent men of the northern marches again. He was asking me to let the lie weigh nothing. And I had spent 23 years and 19 of them on this very stone, making certain that if the day ever came, I would not. But I did not speak. I want you to understand why, because it is the part that looks from the outside like cowardice or weakness, and it is the opposite of both. A king's guard does not speak on his post. It is not a custom. It is a law, and it is a good law, and it is a wiser law than the men who break it understand. The whole worth of the guard, the reason the silence means anything at all, is that we cannot be made to perform. If a guard could be made to speak by a powerful man leaning close, then a guard could be made to speak by any powerful man for any purpose, and the silence would be worth nothing, and the next time it would not be a poor gardener but a kingdom in the balance. The discipline is not for the easy days. The discipline is precisely for the day a powerful man stands in your face and orders you to betray it, because that is the only day the discipline ever costs anything, and a discipline that costs nothing protects nothing. So I held the way I had trained for 19 years to hold, eyes forward, gloves still, boots planted, and inside that stillness I made the one decision that was mine to make and that the law could not take from me. I decided that I would not lie. I would not say I had seen Reed take the star. Silence is not a lie. A guard may be silent forever and break no faith with the truth. What a guard may not do is open his mouth on his post and put the king's uniform behind a falsehood, and I would sooner have been broken on that forecourt than do it. But I also would not speak the truth there, in that place, on that post, ordered by a thief, because the truth spoken there, wrung out by a great man's bullying in front of a crowd, would have been the truth made into a performance, and a performance can be doubted, and I did not want it doubted. I wanted it to land in a place where it could not be moved. And the only place in the kingdom where a guard's word cannot be moved is the place where the law itself reaches into the silence and lawfully commands him to speak. So I waited for that. I had already begun to make it come, but the Lord Treasurer did not know that either. He did not like the silence. They never do. The crowd was watching, and a man who has staged a scene must have his scene go forward, and I was the actor who would not say his line. I felt the change in him the way you feel the air change before weather. The patience went out of the performance and something colder came into it. "Look at me," he said. "Look at me when I am speaking to you." I looked at the far railing and the river beyond it. He put 2 fingers against the breast of my coat, against the wool over my heart, and pushed, not hard, a contemptuous little push, the push you give a door you expect to swing. I did not swing. He pushed again, harder, and I gave him the smallest fraction of a sway and came back to plumb, the way a guard does, the way the wall of the palace itself would if you leaned on it. "They told me you people were the pride of the household," he said, loud enough now for the rope line. "Look at it, a painted soldier, a toy in a fur hat. There is no man in there at all, is there? Just a coat and a cap and a stick they polish for the foreigners to photograph." He turned half to the crowd, playing it, sure of himself, sure that the worst I could do was nothing. "I have asked it a simple question and it will not answer because it cannot. It is not allowed to think. It is only allowed to stand." Some in the crowd laughed. Most did not. I have learned to read a crowd from the inside of stillness. You cannot see them, but you can feel which way they have leaned. And I felt that this one had begun, quietly, to lean the wrong way for the Lord Treasurer. There is something in ordinary people that does not like to watch a great man bully a thing that cannot hit back. He had wanted them on his side, sharing his contempt. He was losing them, and a man like that, losing a crowd, does the worst thing a man can do. He reaches for more force, because force is the only thing he has ever trusted to work. "Salute me," he said. It was a strange order and a stupid one, and the moment he said it I knew he had stopped thinking and begun only to feel the crowd slipping, to feel the silent man defeating him by doing nothing, to feel the awful itch of a powerful man whose power is not landing. "I am the Lord Treasurer of this household," he said. "You will present arms to me. Now, salute, or by God I will have you flogged off this gate." A guard salutes the sovereign, and those the sovereign's own standing orders name. He does not salute a lord because the Lord demands it in a temper. The Lord Treasurer knew that as well as I did. He had simply ceased to care what was true and begun to care only what he could compel. And I gave him, for the 3rd time, the only answer the post permits, which is none. That was when he struck me. I will describe it exactly because the exactness is the thing that mattered later. He did not strike me with his hand. He took the rifle. He reached out and seized the barrel of my rifle where it stood at my side, and he wrenched it, meaning, I think, to tear it from my grip and shame me with it, to show the crowd that the toy soldier could be disarmed by a real man's strength. A rifle on the King's Arch is not a prop. It is held a certain way for a certain reason, and a guard does not surrender it. I closed my grip and held, and he hauled at it, and when it would not come, he lost the last of himself entirely and swung the flat of his other hand across my face, a hard open blow that knocked the chinstrap into my jaw and snapped my head a few degrees to the side before 19 years brought it level again. The forecourt went silent. I have heard that the photographs of that moment traveled the whole kingdom by nightfall, the great lord, his face ugly with rage, his hand still raised, and the guardsman with the print of it reddening on his cheek, eyes forward, rifle held, not moved an inch. I never saw the photographs. I did not need to. I had felt the crowd turn all the way over in that instant, felt the contempt the Lord Treasurer had tried to build curdle and pour itself onto him instead, and I knew, in the cold, clear place that the discipline keeps clear, that he had just done the work for me that I could not have done with 1,000 words. He had taught the whole watching world, in a single blow, exactly what kind of man he was. A man who would strike a soldier forbidden to strike back. A man whose word, after that, no honest person would take above a stone's. My cheek stung. I will not pretend it did not. There is an old anger that lives in a man's body and answers a blow before his mind has any say in it. And that anger stood up in me and put its hand on the rifle alongside mine, and wanted, very much, to bring the iron-shod butt of it around in the short, hard arc that 20 years of drill had cut into my arms, the arc that would have ended the Lord Treasurer's afternoon and very probably his teeth. I knew the arc. My body knew it the way it knows how to breathe, and I held it. That is the only true thing I did on that forecourt, the only act that was mine and not the law's. I held the arc. I let the blow land and stay landed. Because the moment I struck him, the day would have become a brawl between two men, and a brawl has no truth in it, only force, and force was his whole argument. The instant I gave him violence, I gave him the only ground he could win on. Standing still and bleeding a little was the one position in all the world from which he could not move me. And so it was the position I held. And I will tell any young soldier who asks that the hardest blow I ever struck in my life was the one I did not. The captain of the guard had come out by then. He had seen the end of it from the colonnade, and he came across the forecourt at the controlled fast walk that is as near to running as our discipline permits. And there were words between him and the Lord Treasurer that I did not turn to watch and could not have heard over the rope line, which had begun to call out, ordinary voices, ashamed and angry, telling the great Lord what they thought of a man who hit a soldier who could not hit back. The Lord Treasurer's scene had become a scene about the Lord Treasurer, which is the one thing he had never planned for. He had Reed taken away. He went after, fast, with the look of a man hurrying ahead of a story he can no longer control, and I stood the rest of my watch. I want to be honest about the next part, because people like a tale where the truth comes out in a thunderclap and the wicked man is struck down on the spot, and it was not like that. It was slow, and it was procedure, and the procedure is the thing I trusted, and the procedure is why I am able to tell you that it ended right. Before that day was an hour older, before I had even come off the arch, I had begun to set the machinery turning, in the only way a guard may, which is up the chain and by the book. When the captain came to me at the change in the guardroom, and asked me what in the name of heaven had happened on his forecourt, I asked his leave to report, and he gave it, and I told him. Not the crowd's truth, the loud kind, the kind shouted in a forecourt. I told him the watch truth. I told him the hours. I told him what I had seen on the lower gallery on the night the star went missing. The gardener down with a lantern and a bucket at such an hour, up again wet-armed and empty-handed at such an hour. And 2 hours after, a second man, no lantern, along the wall, into the passage and out of it with a flat shape under his coat, away up the treasury stair, favoring the right leg, a ring on his hand that caught the lamp once. I told him I could not swear to the second man's face, for I had not seen it. But I told him what I could swear to, which was the leg and the ring and the hours and the empty bucket. And I told him plainly that the man on the gallery had ordered me, on my post before the crowd, to swear that old Reed had carried up the star, and that I had not done so and would not, because it was not true. The captain was a good officer, and he went pale, because he understood at once what I was telling him and what it would cost to be right about it. The strong room has but 2 keys, he said, half to himself. The king holds one. The Lord Treasurer holds the other. I told him I had only reported what I saw, and that the meaning of it was not mine to declare. That was for those above us. That is the discipline too. A guard reports the fact and does not appoint himself the judge of the fact. But I asked him one thing. I asked him to see that my report went up that day, in writing, witnessed and timed, before any man could say I had invented it after the fact to spite the Lord who had struck me. The captain understood that as well. A truth told after a blow is a truth a clever man can call revenge. He took my account that hour in the guardroom, and had it written fair and signed by me and by him, and by the sergeant of the watch, and timed and sealed. And he carried it himself to the one office that the Lord Treasurer could not silence. the office of the Lord High Steward of the household, who answers to the king alone, and over whom the treasurer has no power at all. And then I went back to my quarters, and I lay on my bed, and I did not sleep, because a man who has at last begun to pay a debt 23 years old does not sleep easily the night the payment is in the post. It took 4 days. 4 days, while the palace boiled with it, the photographs everywhere, the Lord who struck the guard, and underneath that loud story the quiet one beginning to move. A witnessed account, in the Lord High Steward's hands, that did not match the Lord Treasurer's tale at all. The Lord Treasurer, I learned later, spent those 4 days doing what such men do when the ground shifts. He pressed harder. He demanded Reed be charged at once and the matter closed before the inquiry could widen. He let it be known that the guardsman who had insulted him was a malicious man nursing a grievance, that the blow had been a regrettable loss of temper provoked by insolence, that the watch report was the invention of a soldier covering his own insubordination. He was very good at it. He had been talking his way over the truth his whole life, and he was not going to stop now. But he had made one error that he could not talk over, and it was the error of all such men. He had built his lie for a world without a witness, and there had been a witness, and the witness had not panicked and shouted in the forecourt where his word could be drowned. The witness had reported up the chain, in writing, timed before the blow could be called the cause of it, into the one hand the Lord could not reach. The truth had gone where it could not be moved, and now it only had to be asked the right question by the right authority, and the Lord could do nothing but wait for the question to come and dread it. The Lord High Steward was an old man and a careful one, and he did not move until he was sure. He sent men quietly to the cistern and the lower passage. He had the strong room's ledger brought to him, and he read every entry of the past month with his own eyes, and he found, as such men always find when they finally look, the small, careful crookedness that a confident man leaves behind because he has stopped believing anyone will ever check his sums. He sent for the household physician's notes on the Lord Treasurer's spring injury and the leg that troubled him. And on the 4th day, he did the thing that is the heart of everything I have told you, the thing I had waited for on the forecourt and would not steal from the law by speaking too soon. He convened the court in the hall of petitions, with the king present, and he sent for me. I had never stood in that hall except along its wall. It is the great room of the palace, all gilded ceiling and high windows and old stone worn pale by 1,000 years of feet, and at the far end the king's chair stands up 3 steps on a dais, and the king was in it. I will not describe him much. He was a young man for a king, grave and quiet, the son of the old king who had given Reed his cottage, and he had a way of watching that reminded me, oddly, of the way we are trained to watch, taking everything, giving nothing, until the moment to give. The Lord High Steward stood below the dais. The Lord Treasurer stood to one side, magnificent in his best coat, his face arranged into wounded patience, certain even then that this was a formality he would outlast. And old Reed was there, brought from wherever they had kept him, looking smaller than ever in that vast bright room, an old gardener among lords, his shaking hands folded in front of him. I was marched in and halted in the center of the floor, and I stood at attention and looked, by long habit, at nothing. The Lord High Steward spoke first. He spoke to the king, and to the room, and what he said was this, that a charge of theft had been laid against the king's servant Tobias Reed, that the charge rested on the account of the Lord Treasurer of the household, that an account had been received from a guardsman of the watch which did not agree with the Lord Treasurer's, and that there was therefore but one honest course, which was to put the question to the guardsman directly, under the king's own authority, and hear what he had to say. And then the old man turned to me, and he said the words I had been waiting 19 years and 4 days to hear lawfully said. "Corporal," he said, "you are commanded by the authority of the king in the king's own presence to speak. You will tell this court, plainly and without fear, what you saw upon the night the coronation star was lost. Hold nothing back and add nothing. Speak." There is a thing that happens in a soldier when a lawful command unlocks a thing he has held under discipline for a long time, and I do not have a good word for it. It is not relief, exactly, and it is not triumph. It is more like the feeling of setting down a great weight you have carried so long that you had forgotten it was heavy, and standing up straight for the first time in years. I had held the truth on my post under the worst pressure a man had ever put on me, held it through a shove and a slander and a blow across the face, held it for 4 days while a great man called me a liar to the whole kingdom. And now the king's own authority had reached down into my silence and bidden me open it, and the law was on my tongue, and I could at last be the witness I had failed to be on a cold drumhead morning 23 years before. I spoke. I did not speak long. The truth, when you have kept it whole, does not need to be long. I told them the hours. I told them I had stood the lower gallery posting that night, that I do not sleep on a post, that I mark every hour. I told them I had seen the gardener Tobias Reed go down into the passage with a lantern and a bucket to tend the weeping cistern, and that I had seen him come up an hour later, wet to the elbows, carrying his bucket and his lantern and nothing else, and I gave the hour of each. I told them that 2 hours after the gardener had gone back to his quarters, when the passage had been long dark and empty, I had seen a second man come down. I told them he carried no light, which an honest man going about honest work does not do. I told them he kept to the wall. I told them he went into the strong room passage and came out of it with a flat shape held tight under his coat against his ribs, and went away up the treasury stair. I told them I could not swear to his face, for the gallery is high and the light was one lamp, and I would not name a man's face that I had not clearly seen. But I told them 3 things I could swear to before God and the king: that he favored his right leg upon the stairs, with a particular small hitch in the stride; that he wore upon his hand a ring that caught the one lamp once, a hard white flash, as he passed beneath it; and the hour, which was 3:30. Then I stopped, because I had been commanded to add nothing, and there was nothing honest to add. The nomming was not mine to do. I had given the court the fact, exact and whole and timed before any blow could be called its cause, and I let the fact lie there in the middle of that great bright room and do its own work, the way a true thing will if you only set it down where it cannot be moved. It did not take long. I did not see all of it, because my eyes were forward as they are trained to be. But a man hears a great deal standing still, and what I heard was the Lord High Steward saying, quietly, that the household physician had recorded a hunting injury to the Lord Treasurer's right leg in the spring, a thing the whole court had remarked. I heard him say that the strong-room ledger, read entry by entry, showed a quantity of the privy coin entered as paid out for works that no man could find any record of having been done, in the Lord Treasurer's own hand, under the Lord Treasurer's own seal. I heard him say that the cistern had indeed been weeping that night, and that the masons confirmed the gardener's work upon it, exactly as I had described the gardener's hours. And then I heard the room go very quiet, and into that quiet the Lord High Steward said that he must ask the Lord Treasurer to surrender the ring upon his hand for the court to examine. I heard the Lord Treasurer's voice then, and it had changed. The fine round fullness of it, the voice pitched to fill a hall, had a crack down the middle of it now, and through the crack came the sound that is under every bully's confidence when the confidence finally fails: fear, plain and ugly and small. He said it was an outrage. He said the word of a guard, a malicious guard, a guard he had been forced to discipline, could not be said against the word of the Lord Treasurer of the household. He said it loudly, and he said it twice, and the second time it was worse than the first, because the first time he was performing for the room and the second time he was pleading with it, and a room can tell the difference. It was the king who ended it. He had not spoken the whole while. He sat on his 3 steps and watched the way I watch, taking everything, and when at last he rose, the whole hall rose around the motion, the way a field of grain leans before a wind, and the room came to its feet because the king had come to his. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. A king who has been silent through a long, ugly hour does not need to raise his voice when at last he speaks. He said that he had heard the guardsman and that he believed him, and that he had a particular reason to believe him, which was that the man had been ordered by a great lord on his post before a crowd to swear to a thing, and had refused. A man who will not lie when a powerful man commands him to, the king said, and will take a blow rather than break his discipline, and then carries the truth up the proper chain in writing before he can be accused of malice, that, he said, is the only kind of witness a court should ever trust. The men who shout are easy. This man held his tongue under everything until his king bid him open it. I will take his word over a ledger any day, and his word agrees with the ledger besides. I will not give you the Lord Treasurer's face when the king said it. I did not see it, my eyes being forward, and I would not describe it if I had. There is no honor in watching a man go down, even a man who has earned it, and the discipline that would not let me strike him would not have let me gloat either. I only heard it. I heard the ring taken from his hand. I heard the order given. I heard the doors at the far end of the hall, and the footsteps of the household watch coming up the floor, the same watch that had dragged an innocent old man across my forecourt 4 days before, come now for the man who had given the order. And I heard the chains. They led the Lord Treasurer of the household out of the hall of petitions in irons, past the place where I stood at attention in the center of the floor, and as he passed me he turned his head, and I felt him look at me the way the crowd had looked, the way you look at a thing you have always thought was furniture and have just discovered was a man, and a man who saw you. He did not speak. There was nothing left to say that a chain had not already said for him. He had chosen me as the easiest witness in the palace, the one tool he was sure he could pick up and point. He had had it exactly backward. I was the one thing in the household he could not move, and I had been the wall his whole lie leaned on, and when it came time, the wall did not give. He went out into the bright forecourt where he had struck me in chains before the same crowd, and that is the last I ever saw of him. They cleared old Reed at once. The king did it himself from the dais in front of the whole court, said the words plainly, that Tobias Reed was innocent and had always been, that the household had wronged him, that his cottage and his place in the gardens were his for the rest of his days, and his honor was restored entire. Reed stood there with his shaking old folded hands, and did not weep then either, though I think it would have been no shame in him if he had. He looked across the hall at me again. And this time, because the court was dismissing and the discipline of the post no longer held me to the front, I let myself, for 1/2 of 1 second, turn my eyes and meet his. He did not say thank you. He was too far across the room and there were lords between us, and it was not the kind of thing that wanted saying out loud. He only bowed his old bent head to me once, the way he might have brushed 2 fingers along a hedge as he passed it, a small touch, just a touch, the way you greet a friend. And I gave him the smallest inclination a man can give and still call it a bow, and that was the whole of it, and it was enough. It is the only conversation old Reed and I ever had, and it said more than most that use words. I have thought a great deal in the years since about why it ended right when so many such things end wrong, and I have come to believe it had very little to do with me being clever and everything to do with me being still. I was not clever. I am not a clever man. I did not unmask anyone or spring any trap. All I did, all I have ever known how to do, was watch completely and mark the hours and refuse to let a true thing be turned into a false one in my mouth, and then trust the law to come and ask me the question in the place where my answer could not be moved. The cleverness of the Lord Treasurer was a great and supple thing, and it failed. The dullness of an old guardsman who simply would not lie was a small, hard thing, and it held. There is a lesson in that for the young ones, and I give it to them when they ask, which is this. The world is full of men who will tell you that the truth is a weak instrument, too slow and too quiet to stand against power, and that a man who has only the truth and no power had better hold his tongue and keep his post. They are half right. The truth is slow and it is quiet, and on its own it weighs nothing at all. But it weighs nothing only until a man is willing to carry it, and a man who will carry the truth and not set it down, not for a shove, not for a slander, not for a blow across the face, not for 4 days of being called a liar by the whole kingdom, makes the truth heavy enough at last to break a powerful man in chains. The truth has no weight of its own. It borrows its weight from whoever is willing to hold it. That is the whole secret, and it is not a secret at all. People still tell me sometimes that I am the guard who did not move while the great Lord struck him, and they say it as though the not moving were the marvel. It was not the marvel. Any drilled man can hold still under a blow. We are made to. The marvel, if there was one, was smaller and quieter and happened entirely inside a coat and a fur cap on a bright forecourt, and no telephone caught it and no photograph shows it. The marvel was a young soldier on a cold morning 23 years before, who had stayed silent when he should have spoken and lost a good man to it, and who had spent every motionless hour since making himself ready, so that when an innocent old man was at last dragged across his stone, the silence the world mistook for emptiness would turn out to be the fullest thing in the palace. A witness, kept whole and waiting, for the day the law would finally reach in and say the word that set it free. I stood the King's Arch 11 more years after that, and I never once on any of those mornings was tempted to think the stillness was nothing. I had learned what it was for. The post was never a box they put me in. The post was the thing I had made of myself, on purpose, over a lifetime. Against a single day I prayed would never come and stood ready for anyway. And when the day came, I did not move and I did not speak, until my King bid me speak. And then I told the truth, all of it exactly, and I let it fall where it could not be moved, and it was enough. That is the whole of it. A man asked me to lie, and I would not. A man struck me, and I held. And in the end the still man was the only one left standing on his stone, and the loud one went out in chains into the morning, and an innocent kept his cottage and his honor and his quiet old age in the gardens he loved. There are louder stories. There are none I would rather have told true.